In this lesson, we'll begin planning for the shape and placement of buildings on our map. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we finished sort of mapping out the placement of our roads, and I went ahead and adjusted the stroke weight that we're using for each of these. Now, there's one thing I want to point out to you here before we move on to buildings, and let me go ahead and just hide our strokes here. And if you look here, as we approach this roundabout right here, we have sort of a division in the road, and this represents where a median lies. So you can see here that this road splits and goes around a median beginning right about here, and this one splits right about here, and this one actually splits right about here. So in looking at our strokes that we have applied here, we could actually maybe use the stroke width tool to try and vary the width of these strokes, but you know, I'm actually planning on applying type to these strokes a little bit later down the road when we name our streets, so I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm actually going to really approach narrowing these roads a little bit after we've converted these roads into shapes later on. So I tell you what, let's just go ahead and focus now on developing the placement and the shape of these buildings. So, you know, we're working in a very flat two-dimensional surface here, and we're looking at these buildings from the top down. Now, I know we're looking at it from a satellite view, but we can still reduce these buildings to really their basic shapes. So let's go ahead and just start doing that here. The most basic shape is probably the rectangle or the square. So I'm going to come in here and just begin by maybe drawing in some shapes on top of these buildings. But you know, before I do, let's go ahead and look at our layer stack. Right now we just have one layer, we have all our roads on, then we have our reference layer. I think I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more layers here. Let's go ahead and move the roads to the top here, and let's just call these roads. Let's go ahead and name this one buildings. Let's go ahead and name this third layer. Let's name this one, we'll call this one terrain. Alright, so we've got a few different layers now, all set up and ready to receive shapes. So let's go ahead and lock a couple of these layers we're not going to work on. Let's work on this buildings layer right now. Now we've got our rectangle tool selected. Keyboard shortcut for that is M. And let's go ahead and just begin drawing in some of these basic shapes for these buildings. Now it's really hard to see what some of these are, so we're going to have to really kind of take some creative liberties when it comes to some of these buildings. But you know, let's go ahead and, I tell you what, let's just get rid of that stroke, and let's maybe change this to a little more visible color. Let's go ahead and change this to, let's choose this orange color. That looks pretty good for right now. That's nice and easy to see against the map. So let's come in and just start piecing together these buildings. This building has a little bit of an extension right here, it looks like. And I'm going to use my smart guides to make sure that snaps to the rectangle I drew previously. So switching back and forth between my selection arrow and my rectangle tool here, let's go ahead and hide the roads for right now. Alright, zoom in on a couple of these buildings here. Let's draw in a building there, and it's kind of hard to see where this one ends because there's some type on it, but let's go ahead and draw in one right about there. Draw this building in. Just like so. We've got a couple simple buildings over here. We'll draw one in just like so. Now some of these buildings have things to consider as far as different elevations on the top of the buildings. And some of them have some unique shapes, sort of like this one right here. So I'm just going to come in and draw in a shape for that right now. And actually, I tell you what, let me undo that with a Control-Z, and let's draw in this shape first. The shape of this negative space in between, and sort of in this courtyard area for this building. So we'll draw that shape in. Let's come in and draw another shape in for the actual top of the building. Alright, so we've got both shapes there. We're actually going to come back and use our Shape Builder tool. Let me just go ahead and grab that. It's a tool right here that looks like a little arrow over, looks like a couple little circles or maybe a potato. So we'll go ahead and grab that now. And notice here that, let me go ahead and select both these by using my Control modifier key. Notice with this Shape Builder tool, we can actually mouse over portions of these two shapes, and we can actually combine them. Notice there's a little plus by the arrow. If we hold down the Alt key, that plus changes to a minus. So we can actually come over here and subtract shapes. So maybe we want to get rid of that shape, and we're left with the shape of the top of that building. So coming over here, we want to combine these two shapes here. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line connecting those two shapes, and you can see they both get highlighted. And we're going to do the same thing here. And we've got a couple shapes here we just drew. Let's go ahead and draw another line and combine those together. And we've got basically the custom top face of each of those buildings we've just drawn. Now let's move over and look here for some more complex buildings. We'll save this one for just a moment, but take a look at this building right here. This building right here has a fairly complex shape to it. So I'm just going to try and simplify this down to some basic shapes. So I'm going to pull in a rectangle right here. Let's go ahead and pull in another rectangle right here. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on underneath this type right here, but I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and just draw a rectangle right up here. And I'm going to use my selection arrow to rotate this one 45 degrees, just like so. And I bet that'll fit right on top of this wing that comes out right there. So let's go ahead and just drop that into place right here. Alright, now some of these details like these shaved corners and things like that, we can always come back in and add later. But looking here at this, this is an area where I probably would go ahead and just sort of take some creative liberty here. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this shape around, and let's just maybe tuck this shape in and around right about here. We'll just sort of make an extension onto this wing right here. Maybe we can just play with some of these shapes. Maybe we can move this one over just a little bit and stretch it out some. It looks pretty good for right now. So really there's a lot of fairly unique shaped buildings that we're dealing with here. And we can actually just simplify these just to the face of these buildings that's on the top and their basic shapes, because we're going to come back in and sort of flush out some of this detail here in just a little bit, but for right now this will work just fine. So let's come over and draw another shape here. Don't want to bring up that dialog. That's the dialog that comes up if you just click and don't drag your rectangle. So let's just snap this one into position here with our smart guides. We'll come in between lessons and fill in any of these buildings that we miss here, but you see the basic process here is simplifying these buildings to basic shapes. We've got kind of a complex building over here, but this can still be simplified into basic shapes. We have sort of an L shape right here. You have a square right here that's actually probably a part of this portion of the roof. There's different elevations there that we're going to need to deal with at some point, but for right now we're just basically trying to carve out the footprint of each one of these buildings and how it's going to sit on the terrain. And looking at this building right here, this could easily be simplified to just a triangle. So let me just come in and draw in sort of a rectangle shape on top of this right here. We'll just swing that into position. You know what, let's use our pen tool and come in and just click on this corner right here, converting it into a triangle shape. And, like I said before, we can come back and refine these. I know that this has sort of some rounded corners around on these two edges of that triangle. We can come in and refine those in just a little bit. So I'm just coming in and hitting each of these buildings, trying to pull out the basic shape, the footprint of the building and how it's going to sit here. So some of these buildings actually extend beyond the borders of our map. That's okay. We'll go ahead and just include those and just snap those to the map if we have to. Just like so. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've already done here with regard to the streets we've already laid out. So let me go ahead and bring that layer back in. You can see here that the streets are overlapping some of these shapes, but you know what, that's okay. These are just rough positionings and rough shapes for right now. Let's come in and grab our shape builder tool and combine any of these that we missed. Let's just do a Control A to select everything. Yeah, it looks like we missed this crazy looking building right here. So we'll just come in and use that shape builder tool again to combine these shapes. Alright, so we've got one shape there for that entire building. So in this lesson we've begun drawing in the positioning and the shape of some of the buildings on our map. In the next lesson we're going to continue on where we're leaving off here, and we're going to look at naming some of our streets.